Countries in Latin America are discovering new ways to leverage their assets. Whether it's robust resources,
Yes.
rhythmic traditions, or opening destinations to more of the world. We'll highlight some of these opportunities and speak to some of the entrepreneurs banking on success in the region. That's all up next in the Marketplace. Welcome to Marketplace Latin America. I'm Gabriela Frías, and this is the program where we highlight some of the industries driving the region's economy. Like many people around the world, I start my day with a cup of coffee. I like mine negro sin azúcar, black with no sugar. No matter where I buy it, there is a good chance the ingredients came from Latin America. You see, coffee is one of the industries Latin America dominates. When it comes to total production, 3 of the top 5 countries are in the region. Brazil leads the way by far, producing more than 50 million bags of coffee beans. But while some countries are booming in bean production, others have to find their niche, like Panama, home to a variety of coffee so special, CNN's Richard Quest had to go taste for himself.
These beans may look like the sort you'd use in a typical cup of coffee, but they're actually some pretty pricey ingredients. This is what?
This is the most expensive coffee in the world right now. They auctioned it for $800.
$803 to be precise, per pound, smashing the previous auction record by more than $200. A bit fruitier.
Okay.
The coffee is called Natural Geisha, a unique taste that I was able to pick out of a line of other varieties. There's something going on with this one.
So this coffee was the award-winning, the
Yes.
one that broke the record.
I knew I could spot an award-winning coffee. Tasting is fun, but I need a proper cup to fully appreciate this masterful blend. There is something delicious about enjoying a cup of the most expensive coffee in the world. And it begs the question, what is it about the geisha bean that gives it its value? To understand this, we have to go up into the mountains to see the process of growing and how the bean is treated. Then we'll understand what gives geisha its gusto. The Mastas family estates and several other farms that grow geisha beans are located in the mountain town of Boquete in Panama.
We have a special, unique, world-unique microclimate. We have the forest that surround us, and we have the ultra-high elevation. All that combination of factors made our coffee so super special.
Here to be seen, the geisha and other specialty beans harvested in its rawest form. Ripe, red cherries plucked one at a time. Most of what is produced here won't sell for anything near $800 per pound. The Lamastas family say they sold 50,000 pounds of coffee last year, and the average price was $13 a pound, which is still pretty good because globally prices are closer to $1 a pound. The strategy is obvious. Make more money with fewer quality beans.
Yes, we grow very, very little coffee, while Colombia produces or exports 12 million 100-pound weight bags. In Costa Rica, 2 million bags of 100-pound bags. Panama only export 50,000. So we will never be able to compete, in volume. Quality is how we compete. The geisha variety, it was discovered to be a variety so outstanding, so different, very, very exotic, that the buyers were willing to, pay whatever for that variety.
Not all farms in Panama have the conditions or resources to produce specialty coffee like geisha. In other parts of the country, they've found ways to add value to more run-of-the-mill beans.
Esto estaba desmontado. Esto era Indiana.
This was barren. There was nothing. It was too hot, mostly because there were no trees here.
Porque no había árbol.
Jose Vargas is describing how this area looked before an unexpected partner entered the picture, the Panama Canal Authority.
Nosotros necesitamos agua en cantidad y calidad.
Look, we need water in terms of quality and quantity. To maintain that quality and quantity, we have to work side by side with the communities involved.
In other words, fertile lands and vegetation around the Panama Canal prevents erosion and landslides that can pollute the waters. So it's in the authorities' best interest to support an industry that will continue to cultivate and enrich the soils. To date, around 1 million saplings were planted across more than 2,000 hectares of land. They grow Robusta coffee here. It's a lesser value bean, largely used for instant varieties. But it thrives in lower elevations and can be harvested more often than the geisha.
Metodología en el
We
cual
applied a methodology in which we establish a plantation, and in the middle of it, we sow food crops like yuca, corn, beans, plantains, and that guaranteed the food supply. In the meantime, the crops like coffee or trees grew. So after 2 years, farmers began to reap all of those resources.
Now they've mastered the growing technique, the farmers are looking for ways to cut costs and so increase profits. Shiny new equipment funded by the Panama Canal Authority. It helps the farmers get more bang for their bean.
Tenemos esta pequeña planta como asociación.
We now have this little factory as an association, and this benefits 60 producers from this region. It's a big game changer, because before, as a producer, we harvested the product and we sold it cheap. Nowadays, we sell a processed product at a better price. That has increased our profits. Now it's even better than before. We can say we earn 60% more.
Pongámosles al 60% más.
Panama's coffee exports have been on a decline since 2016. So things aren't percolating yet. If the country continues to find ways to add value and produce high-quality beans, then most certainly it can create a ripe environment for the players involved. Richard Quest, Panama City, Panama.
Next, get ready to go cruising to a destination more Americans are getting access to. It's time to talk about the cruise industry. Because many popular cruise destinations are in Latin America, it's a vital industry for the region that just keeps getting bigger. Globally, a record 25.8 million passengers took cruises in 2017. That number is expected to be even higher in 2018. One of the countries recently joining in on the action is Cuba. Because after the U.S. eased trade embargo rules in 2016, cruise ships from America were once again able to dock at Cuba's port. This is video of the first ship that arrived after the policy change. Take a look at the impact that had. The country had fewer than 40,000 cruise passengers in 2015. Just 2 years later, they had more than 10 times that. And in 2018, they're expecting more than 500,000. Now the country has to deal with a massive influx of new visitors. CNN's Patrick Upman shows us how it's going so far.
It's a sight not seen in Havana for a very long time. Cruise boats sailing across the Straits of Florida from the U.S. to Cuba, carrying thousands of American visitors, many of whom have been waiting their whole lives to visit this once off-limits island.
It's been on my bucket list for a long time to see the old cars and the buildings, the architecture, things like that.
Wanted to see Cuba before it got totally I'm going to say modernize with the big hotels. Want to see old Cuba.
Old Cuba means pre-1959 revolution Cuba. When leftist firebrand Fidel Castro took power, everything suddenly changed. Alarmed at Castro's solidarity with the Soviet Union, the U.S. imposed sanctions on Cuba. From then on, any American economic activity with the island, including tourism, was considered to be, quote, trading with the enemy. Then, after 5 decades of Cold War hostility, a sudden shift.
In the most significant changes in our policy in more than 50 years, we will end an outdated approach that for decades has failed to advance our interests, and instead, we will begin to normalize relations between our two countries.
Outright tourism was still technically prohibited, but expanded categories of legal travel finally gave U.S. cruise companies the opening they were waiting for.
We've cruised basically around Cuba for almost 50 years, pretty much every week of every year. So to actually be able to come in and show our guests what Havana is like today is a big deal for us.
So far, the cruise business in Cuba is booming, from just 37,000 passengers in 2015 to more than 500,000 passengers in 2018 as of May, according to Cuban tourism officials.
We're pretty confident that over the years, Cuba can be, should be, will be a mainstay destination for cruises in and around the Caribbean.
The Trump administration in 2017 retightened some regulations on U.S. travel to Cuba. Cruise travel, though, was not targeted. Cuba wasn't ready for the surge in tourism, and all over Havana, the government is racing to finish construction on luxury hotels. Until then, cruise ships serve as a bridge.
Cruise ships are really floating hotels. So when you have a country like Cuba that has a shortage of hotel rooms, this is a cheap and quick way to have an increase in the number of hotel beds without really having to spend the 30 years we're going to take to build the adequate infrastructure.
Betancourt says for Cuba to get a return on that investment, cruise ship passengers will need to come back to the island and for longer stays.
The majority of passengers do not come back to stay. But in the case of Cuba, that may be a little different, particularly Americans, who now that they've had a glimpse of the country, may at some point come back. Cuba is a unique destination, and one that has been denied to U.S. travelers for so long that whether by air or by sea, tourism officials here believe Americans will continue to come in greater numbers. Whatever its future is in Cuba, the cruise industry has finally arrived. Patrick Ottman, CNN Havana.
Next, we'll take you down the aisles of one of Brazil's largest retailers. Welcome back. Magazine Luiza, or as many Brazilians call it, Magalu, is a huge retailer in Brazil. With 885 stores and a huge e-commerce presence, the company had nearly $4 billion in sales in 2017. Their CEO tells Shasta Darlington how they've grown from a mom-and-pop shop into what they are today.
So how old is this store?
10 years old. We arrived in São Paulo, the biggest city of Brazil, in 2008, with 50 stores at the same day, and this was the flagship one. My aunt started the business 60 years ago. Her name is Luisa. He was the best saleswoman of the city. The first name of the company was A Cristaleira, but people kept asking her to change the name, and she did a contest. The population of Franca chose Luisa in the name. So they chose Magazine Luiza, and she put in the name of the company.
And yet, magazine in Portuguese isn't the magazine that we think of in English.
Magazine in Portuguese means, it comes from French and means department store.
What were you selling 60 years ago? What were you selling 10 years ago? And now, what are you selling?
So I say always that my aunt sold the first TV to most of the citizens in the countryside of São Paulo. Luisa, the second Luisa, which ran the company over the last 20 years, sold the first washing machine, and now I'm the CEO, I'm selling the first connected product. About 20 years ago, we started investing a lot in technology, in the new digital channels. So I think we created e-commerce before e-commerce was launched. So we launched the physical stores without inventory in 1995 in a very small rural city in the crowd side of São Paulo. And we saved money from having inventory in the stores, and we invested less on capex. Then we launched the e-commerce, and with the e-commerce we started serving all the countries. So now we are pretty much a digital platform with physical point of touch, and not only the traditional mom and pop shop that we were 60 years ago. Magazine Luiza was profitable since the beginning. Obviously, when you work in a country like Brazil with, I think, many crises, a lot of volatility over the years, we have faced more than 50 different economic and harsh crises, hyperinflation, etc. One or other year, we may have faced some losses, but the majority of the years since the beginning, the company was profitable.
And yet, if you look back just very recently, the share price in 2015 was less than R$1. Brazil was in its worst recession on record. And there's a lot of talk about companies like Amazon coming in. Didn't look very good for Magazine Luiza. Fast forward 3 years later, and you're in an excellent position. What did you do?
We focus a lot on the digital transformation part. Currently, we have one of the highest proportion of e-commerce sales overall. Among all retailers worldwide is around 35%. Our e-commerce is growing 60%, and we are doing that, increasing profits at the same time. And that's very rare because in Brazil, the majority of the e-commerce operations are, they make a loss.
Now, what are the next challenges? You do have a very big competitor knocking on the door here in Brazil, Amazon. Are there concerns that they could basically take over and you could see a repeat of what we saw with traditional retailers in the United States? Could Magalu be a victim of Amazon?
Okay, I think now, I think there is one, Brazil is not for beginners. We have a very bad logistics system and very high interest rates. So this all makes challenging for every retailer in Brazil, and more even for foreigner retailers, being tech or non-tech, to tackle this. I think the best model to tackle these bottlenecks in Brazil is to be omnichannel. If you don't have the support of physical stores, if you don't have the same truck delivering products from stores and from the online, you don't have the synergies required to make money in e-commerce in Brazil. The focus now of the company is to make Brazil digital. Making Brazil digital through helping them to use technology and to improve their business and lives with it.
For our last story, I want to take you to Argentina. Many may want to dance around economic stories in this country because a dwindling currency value and rising inflation have them in a financial crisis. But dance is creating a small bright spot for the economy, specifically the country's most recognized form of dance, the tango. Every year, hundreds of dancing couples from all over the world battle it out in Buenos Aires. Thousands watch as dancers try to prove their steps, twists, and glides are the best at the World Cup of Tango.
The World Tango Dance Tournament has been done in this country for 16 years, and it's getting more and more successful. In 2018, 620 dance partners took part in it.
In Buenos Aires, tango is more than choreographed dance moves. It's a tradition that's infused in the culture, and you can see its influence all over.
Tango Tango is very special. It's related to the sentimental part of tourism. It has grown exponentially around the world. That's why 36% of foreign tourists consider tango as the third most important activity here in Buenos Aires.
Even U.S. President Barack Obama showed his tango skills when he visited Argentina in 2016. It was a big moment for the woman leading him that night.
Muchísima ayuda.
He helped a lot, and it's still helping. That dance was seen around the world. It was in every news program, on the cover of every newspaper, and tango was in the spotlight. People who didn't know what tango was searched for it on the computers, and they became interested. That's what happened.
One of the more popular ways to see a tango performance is a dinner show at venues like El Viejo Almacén. The owner of the 50-year-old tango house knows his clientele well.
Tenemos un 70% de turismo.
70% are tourists. Most of them come from September to April. That's the peak season for us. But tourism is very important for us. If the country is expensive, there are less tourists.
The value of the Argentina peso against the dollar has dropped about 50% over the last 12 months. The tango industry isn't immune to the downturn.
On one hand, the current exchange rate is favorable to sell our products abroad. The problem is that everything is getting more expensive in Argentina in relation to the increasing value of the dollar. So it's like a permanent struggle.
Handmade neo-tango shoes are a popular choice when it comes to tango footwear.
The market is not always stable in Argentina. It can be unpredictable. Nowadays, it's not easy to export our product, but even so, we sell shoes to the United States, Russia, Japan, and cities where it's still possible to sell them.
It isn't clear when Argentina's financial downturn will end. But entrepreneurs in the tango industry are managing the twists and turns of the economy.